Last time we removed the baffle on this exhaust. This time we're going to make the exhaust a little bit louder and look a little bit better too, because what we're going to do is we're going to stubby it. So we're going to chop it off about here. So let's get into it. We're going to start by removing the end cap here. This is what the previous owner tried to do on this. I don't know how far they got, but we're going to show you how to remove it the proper way once you've got the baffle removed. Without the baffle removed, it's much harder to get this end can off. And here there are scars and scratches and damage where the previous owner has obviously clamped this in a vise of some sort in order to try and pull it off. They've already drilled out the rivets. You can see the rivets here, and drilling them out is quite straightforward. All you do is you take a drill, you put it in like that, and you drill. Make sure you only drill just enough that the head of the rivet falls off. You don't want to be drilling in to here and making a bigger hole here or damaging in here. Although in this case it probably doesn't matter so much because we're going to throw that bit away anyway. But still, good practice just to drill that in until the head comes off and work your way around until they're all removed like this. Once they're removed, we can pull this off. Now, if you've still got the baffle in and you want to do this, it's harder because you've got to somehow get a grip of this end can and pull it off. Now, you might get away with a soft jaw, something like this sort of a wooden vise or soft jaws in your vise, but even so, you're still, this here, I don't know whether you can see, this is dented in from where it's been gripped, so it's not a good solution. If you've got the baffle out, it's easy. So let's show you how that works. What I'm going to use is a blind bearing puller like this. If you're going to work on a bike for any length of time, these are quite invaluable because they allow you to pull wheel bearings out and that sort of thing. So this is what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to take this and I'm going to push it down inside. Right, and you might be able to see it's starting to pull away a little bit here. And there we go. That's all it takes. Right, so I've just hammered out the dents a bit in these end caps and run the DA over them so they're not quite smooth and shiny. That is shiny at the moment, but that hopefully should go away once the end cap gets a bit hot. So that's the end cap. Now inside here you can see that we've got the perforated tube that allows the exhaust to actually bleed out into this insulation. There's some sort of wire wool and then some form of insulation. You really should be wearing a mask if you're going to be dealing with this sort of stuff. Now, a couple of things to note. One is that this overhangs the end of this. Bear in mind, if you've got this, you really shouldn't be using some sort of rotary device like an angle grinder, because these are fibrous, although they're not very long fibers, but they could get caught up into the blade and cause it to jam and break and explode and all that sort of stuff. So what we're going to do is going to mark the cut line. Now I'm going to use this here as a marker, and I'm just going to place tape along it. Right, so that's going to mark my cut line. My preference would be to use an angle grinder to cut this, but I'm not going to. This is, as far as I can tell, alloy, so it should cut very easily. So let's get set up and see if we can cut this. Now, I'm going to recommend that you wear a mask. Right, so with that cut through, we can slide that off. We've still got this pipe in the middle to cut through. What we need to do now is to cut this back so that we leave some overhang as we had before. Remember, you can always cut back more, you can't cut back less. This end needs to be smoothed off a bit. Okay, so what we're looking for is a nice neat line along the edge of our mark. So file it gently down to here. Try and avoid disturbing these fibres. You should really wear gloves when you're doing this to avoid them getting in your hands, and you definitely don't want to be breathing them. So file that down to the line as best you can. Keep it nice and smooth, and then we can, once you're happy with that you're there, we can take that off. And start to think about refitting the end cap. So keep your insulation as neat as you can. Now the end cap will slide inside this pipe here, but I can almost guarantee that the shape this will probably be a little bit distorted from being used on the bike and so forth. So this probably won't slip straight in. So what I want to do first is just make sure it will fit before we try and make it fit. So you can see this is not really fitting very well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a hammer and I am just going to fold in these edges a little bit. I think what's happened is when I've been beating these dents out, I've raised these up. So I'm just going to get a hammer and knock those down a bit. Probably easier just to get mole grips on there and bend it back in. So just get it to the point where you're able to start sliding it in, and you probably want to deburr the inside edges here because there's folded over metal. So get a file or something, or a knife blade given its alloy, and just cut that away so that these will slide in. preferably do this in a well ventilated area, and continue until you can start to slide it in. We don't want to do more than that just yet. Right, it's taken me a very long time to actually get this all so it does fit in here, and even now it's not really fitting that well. This is not the same shape as this, maybe because it's distorted, I don't know, but anyway, it doesn't really want to fit. So, but I've got it just edged in. At this point you've got two choices, because we do need to fix this in place. Now we've got the holes here, but we've got no holes here. So as I say, we have two choices. We can either just push this in and then drill new holes, say here and here, so we avoid this hole, or we can try and mark the positions of these holes and then hope that they're going to line up well enough for us to be able to fix it back in. Now that's what I'm going to try, but wish me luck is all I can say. Now the worst part is that having spent a good half an hour easing this in, I'm now going to put it back out again. Measure the centres. Now doing this is going to make this go back out of shape even more, so it's going to be fun to get it back together, but it is what it is. So we've marked one. I'll try and get these punched without causing too much distortion. That one looks a bit out of line. Don't think I've got that very straight. Right, so tapping this down evenly now so that it comes all the way to this ridge. I'm still a little bit off here. Looks like one of my holes is maybe not going to line up as well as it could. Now I had intended to put some sealant in here before I drifted it in, but one side went in a bit quicker than I was expecting. So yeah, here we seem to be a little bit off. My holes are almost in line, but not quite. I'm not surprised because I went with a really tight sized hole, so I'm just going to use the drill to ream those out a bit. I think I'm happy with where that sits. Right, so we're pretty much ready with this now. The end cap's back in, pretty square, it's all looking good. What we need to do now is to rivet this back on. Now for this I am going to use a heavy duty riveter because I'm using fairly large stainless steel rivets. You should be able to still do this with a sort of a standard one, but it's probably going to be a little bit more hard work. But anyway, I think it'll produce the results that I want. So let's get on with it. These are the rivets that I'm using. So it's a stainless steel rivet and I've got the rubber washer on there as we had on these. So this should just go down in here and we should be able to rivet it on. Now this will work on these, so it will sort of fit on there. It's a bit of a struggle, so I'm going to go upgrade and I'm going to use a bigger set simply to make my life easier. So let's see how this will work. So this is the new rivet. It's of a similar look to these ones here. It's a little bit smaller in comparison and it's not as domed. It's close, it's not the same, but it's a lot better than the alloy rivets that most people would automatically use. So let's get the other four in and then we just need to put some sealant on here so it matches the sealant here. Now this obviously was done out of a gun. I don't have it, so I'm just going to put it on by hand and see what we end up with. But at least it'll seal any little leaks. Not that it really matters with a big hole in the end of it, but you know, you don't want to get black staining coming out from exhaust leaks. So let's get on. Right, I'm just using some black silicone. Experiment on the back side of it first. Okay, I can see this is going to get messy. Okay, that was a bit of a fail, so let's try again. Okay, that's a better technique and much more factory. Right, now I need to do some minor cleanup and let that dry. So there you go. That is the Stubby stock exhaust. For me, in stubby form, with no baffle and a decat which removes the cat and the pre-silencer. This is too loud for where I live. So next stage for me will be finding a way to put this back in on a non-permanent basis, so I can have this in or out depending on how I want the bike to sound. But I like the look. It needs the shield put on, back on and so forth, but it's good. I'm happy with it, and as you can see, it's a simple enough job to do. It's a bit fiddly. What I would recommend to you is when you cut this down, also cut the insulation back to that level. It's too messy to try and cut it and then redo it, because getting this cap back in can be quite a pain, to be honest. A little bit of a struggle, because by the time you've cut this and you've made it square and so forth, you've distorted this a little bit out of shape, and the cap itself has probably distorted a bit coming out, so they're quite hard to get back together. So I would recommend stubby that insulation back, leave the pipe a bit longer in the middle because it's got this much extra room, but don't leave it too long, and there you go. It's a simple enough job to do, and I really like them. So thanks for watching, and I will see you soon.